Our last company speaker before we turn to Doc and then wrap up and have a few more drinks represents, if you remember when I was talking about those 10,000 federal information systems that are such a mess, Enigma.io is a company that has the mission of cleaning them up, making them useful, and turning them into real resources for all of us. We're very lucky to have with us Marc daCosta, co-founder of Enigma. Marc, please join us. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, and thank you all very much for being here, and my thanks to Joel and the GovLab for extending the invitation to us. So as Joel said, Enigma is what we call a search and discovery platform for public data. And I'll tell you exactly what that means in just a moment. But I'd like to first start by talking about public data a bit. So this is, of course, a very famous image, this blue marble picture of the planet Earth. And when this came out in the 1970s, it was extremely important because it, in a lot of ways, gave us a new way of understanding our planet and our world and sort of gave us a new contextualization to things. But of course, this is a very complex system, and we can draw upon other sources of public data to start to expand and increase our appreciation and understanding of it. So here, just what you see in the slide is an overlay of the blue marble of the Earth with a public data set, here a non-governmental one, pulled from the Union of Concerned Scientists, showing the position of all of the satellites that are in orbit around us. But of course, public data is a much larger and broader field than just that. The specificities of it become really exciting to us. And so just to kind of give some examples of when we talk about public data, the way that we think about it is really quite broad. So you can sort of think about very high resolution things. So moving from every oil well in the United States and its production and location to things like every shipping container coming into the country, or drawing upon an FCC database, the ability to see every antenna atop a building in the city and things of this nature. And so public data is an extremely broad and rich trove, but there's a real problem with it that's been alluded to earlier this evening, and that's what we call the public data paradox, which is, while this data is public by license, it's not really accessible. And there's a bunch of reasons why that is. We call them the sort of key usability problems of public data, and they're sort of a few-fold. The first one is that there's an absence of a global view on public data. So you may say that you want to find out more about a company or a place or whatever it may be. You don't necessarily know where to look. You can't just go to Google and surface this data. And even though you may know it exists, so theoretically you may know that the Department of Transportation maintains information on every truck that passes through a weigh station on a U.S. federal highway, actually doing the work of finding that data is extremely hard. And I know that firsthand because it took me 3 weeks just to find where this one particular data set is. But then to sort of use this as an anecdote, that certainly wasn't the end of the struggle. The data set that I got was an export of some sort of 1970s cobalt data format, and some work needs to be done there in order to clean it up and get it into a usable form. And that sort of, in some respects, speaks to what I see as the third usability problem around public data, which is without a system that gives you a kind of global view of it, it's impossible to sort of surface bits of information that are relevant through relationships. So, if it doesn't show up directly, and maybe you'll have an entity or something that shares an address with another one in a data set that would never even occur to you. So this is, in a sense, the sort of problemscape that Enigma is working in. And the way that we've gone about addressing it is through building what we call an infrastructure for public data. And this is sort of combined out of many individual parts. Just sort of speak briefly about them. Really at the base of what we do is in content acquisition. That's sort of coming back to this anecdote about the DOT data set, but you can think about it more broadly as well. So we basically go and do that in two different ways. We go and crawl all of the .gov websites that are out there using different heuristics to find where the interesting sources of data are, and then sort of predicated on that, start to bring the ones that we find most juicy into our system. And then the second way we go about getting data is through a bit more of a manual approach. So there's a tremendous amount of really valuable data that's just simply not online. So to come back to this earlier example of oil production, for instance, that's data that's maintained on a state-by-state basis And each of those states have their own systems for distributing it, and most of the times that's through optical media. So, every day when the mailman comes is a big sort of Christmas day for us in a sense, because there's always sort of new offline data that's coming in that way. So for us, that's the sort of baseline of what we do. And then atop it is where sort of the technology starts to get a bit more interesting. We've built what we call a relational engine. And what that does is lets us sort of search across all of this data that we've done the work of pulling into one central place, and enabling users to start to surface interesting data sets and connections and entities within that store of data. And collectively, these two pieces power our main products. So the first one, which I would encourage you all to go online and sign up for if you're interested in, is our web app. So that's at enigma.io. You're all welcome to make free accounts there. It's today a pay service, but we'll be moving to a freemium model shortly. And there you can actually go and interact with and explore this whole universe of data and sort of get a sense of it. And in that, we found the most interesting use cases to be both in investigative journalism and in professional services, or really anyone who's interested in doing deep diligence on a company or place or person. The second is through a set of productized APIs. So, interesting to us, we've really started to focus there along underwriting businesses. So both in small and medium-sized business credit underwriting, and also in property and casualty insurance underwriting. And in both of those circumstances, we're able to do what I think is some of the really important work in public data, which is start to build conduits and connections to sort of recouple this information that's, I suppose, in the first place generated by economic activity, and which really shows us a lot about the world around us, with people who are trying to make decisions about the world or understand it better. So in any event, thank you very much. That's essentially the high end of what we're doing. And if you have any questions, I'd love to chat after the event. Thank you.
Marc, thank you very much. Interestingly, one of the largest categories of companies that we're finding in the Open Data 500 is companies that are trying to take data and make it more usable. And I think Enigma is really one of the just standout examples of how to do that and what the benefits can be.